Hello everyone, welcome back to our video series on creating assignments, designing assignments for assessment. This video is intended to help us generate assessment criteria for the assignment, which is going to be kind of the challenge in the coming few days for all of us, because as you all know, our students are not coming back to the universities to be examined, and we need to set a process in place that comes a little bit differentiating and that ensures at least that our students have learned enough to be able to generate what we will call an assignment. In the last video, we spoke a little bit about how to design the assignment itself. We might be producing another video on the actual steps of design, but for now, we thought that you needed to take a look into how we can use these as an assessment tool and how do we generate what we call rubrics in order to make sure that our assignment is reliable when it is graded and utilized by faculty. So why use criteria? Well, the learning goals are broad, they're ambiguous, and a clear set of defined criteria is always useful because it helps us take a look at what are the things that we actually need to assess. When the students see them as well, it's also a guide for them to produce proper work that assesses what it is intended to assess. As the examiner, of course, it's a lot of help for you to be able to assess the student assignments in a consistent way. If you are asked to put grades and scores, this will definitely help you. And the criteria or the checklist or whatever you choose to call it, it defines the key aspects of performance that you want your students to achieve by this assignment. So when writing assessment criteria, take care that the criteria should be relevant to the learning outcomes that they are intended to assess. They should relate also to the level of attainment. For example, first, second, third year students, postgraduate students, how are you gonna differentiate between the levels of attainment of each of those? So the criterion should state specifically what you want from each level of student. You should check it, by the way. You don't just generate it and just go ahead. You better check it with a colleague, because just to make sure that their understanding of what you have written is similar to what your understanding, which might in a way reflect how the students will perceive these criteria. Take care, don't make it too long, because when it's too long and too sophisticated, it becomes very tedious and it becomes a load rather than becoming an aid for you to mark the assignment. So don't make it too long. This is an example of what we call the assessment criteria. As you can see, the assessment criteria here, this is one that is utilized by a university. We did not just make it up. So as you can see, there is a classification here of number 1, structure, number 2, presentation and style, number 3, content. So these are 3 assessment areas that you will be assessing. And for each of these areas, there are criterion in these areas that tell you how much percent of this area of the grade you should be giving the student if they have this part done. So for example, I say in the structure part, if there is a clear introduction, then the student deserves 10% of the mark, for example. If the aims and objectives are clearly stated, then the student will take another 5% of the mark, etc., etc. This is what we call assessment criteria. We can make this assessment criteria and publicize it to the students. It makes no difference because, as we said last time, it is not a surprise. We're not taking students by surprise. We actually want them to perform very well, because if they take this criterion and they build their assignment on it, it will make my life easier and it will make their learning better. So, what is a rubric? Is it any different from the assessment criteria? Yes. A rubric is more elaborate. So I don't just say what the standard is or what I'm looking for in the document. I actually say what it is worth when it is performing to a specific criterion. So the criteria are listed, as you can see here on the column, and I put a scale here on the top. So when I put a scale on the top row, I ask myself, scale 1, scale 2, scale 3 are 3 levels of students. I'm accepting all 3 of them, but I'm grading them differently. So in criterion 1 would be a part of the task. For example, in the clarity, if the students, for example, in clarity would be a criterion. And then I ask myself, what level of clarity am I taking from level 1 students? What level of clarity am I taking in level 2 students? And in level 3. So you say, for example, for level 1 students, it will be okay for me if they introduce the definition of the concept. That's clarity level number 1. Clarity scale number 2, or level number 2, if they put, for example, definitions and then cut down this definition into individual aspects or individual items, that's level number 2. Scale number 3 or level number 3, clarity for me would be for the students to not just put the definition in, not just break down the definition, but compare this definition with other existing definitions. That's just an example. So this is what we call a rubric. The rubric starts with a task description at the top, and then maybe you could state your learning goal, and then all along the column you put the criterion that you're looking for. Most probably these criterion are the criteria for assessment that you generated a while back, and then put levels of attainment or levels of expression of attainment under the scale in each one of the criteria. This would be a rubric. For example, this is a rubric that the criterion are listed here. Depth of analysis is one. Grasping the reading is another. Thesis and paragraphs is the third. Evidence is a fourth. And for each one of them, there are 4 levels of attainment, as you can see. It starts with, let me move this along. It starts with, you're not yet competent, or you're fairly competent, or highly competent, or sophisticated. You can do it this way down or the other way up, any way you choose. As long as the level of attainment is mentioned here, that's great. And then you state here what you expect from the student. Not competent is what is the level that, for me, the student has not passed. So the student has not passed if the paper does not address so, so, and so. If these items are not mentioned in the paper, these become the cutoff for me. Fairly competent is the basic requirement for the pass grade. So the paper does not address some of the aspects, but it addresses maybe 2 of them. So if he addresses 2 of these aspects in the analysis, it will be acceptable for me. And then I go up with my expectation from the students, and up again with my expectation from the student when the student becomes sophisticated. If it's just a pass or not pass grade, I would be very happy with the difference between competent and non-competent student, and write down the rubrics for each of these. So this is how, in short, you can design your rubric. But a key to setting the rubric is faculty consensus. Make sure your faculty understand the rubric. If they don't understand the rubric, they will not be able to grade properly. And you will find, again, variation in the grading, which is something we do not want to do. And make sure as well that faculty agree, they have a consensus that these are the rubrics that represent the student learning in this specific assignment. So again, make sure that faculty understand and that they agree. So grading student papers, reducing faculty workload while improving feedback to students. This is a paper written by Kathy Pestek. And in this paper, Kathy actually highlighted a list of top 10 criterion that she used in writing issues, in assessment of writing issues in assignments of students. And as you can see, she has given here codes for each of them. A C represents clarity. A CAS represents casual writing style. A K represents awkwardness. So you're awkward. I just represent this with a K. When I put an N, it's unnecessary. And you might ask, what does this mean and why is it important? It's important because when you are grading 1,000 papers, you need to make sure that you have a shorthand for yourself and for your faculty as a mutual understanding for you guys in order to understand each other's grading. This is something you write in the paper while you're marking it. So when anybody else comes and looks at the paper, they see a T and they say, what does a T stand for? You say, it's okay, just go back to the top 10 list of winning issues. Transition. Transition is not clear. Think about what you just said. Even students, when they receive these papers again and they find a T, it just simply means that the transition is wrong. You need to think about what you just said, revise that. So this just means that these top lists of writing issues, for example, or the code that we have generated is something that we train faculty on, and it is something that we send out to students because it's then that students can understand the shorthand in the feedback that you have given. Isn't that nice? I love this article. But then there's another website called Fast and Equitable Grading. It gives you a few advice on how to do your grading fast. Number one, of course, is to have key answers or keywords next to you. Make annotations like the one we just mentioned and write those down instead of writing long sentences for other faculty to understand and for student feedback. And also, when it's a problem-solving question, work through the problem yourself just before you start to grade it, because it's then that you understand where the problems are. Another piece of advice is to maybe grade one question or one assignment that looks the same. It's so much time saving. Do this all at once, and then do other assignments in other times. So just do the similar assignments together, then move on to the other assignments. For example, sort student results in piles. The A students are here, the B students here, pass students here, fail students here, whatever you decide, but pile them just before you start giving out the grades. If you have the same kind of assignment, group them together and do their assessment together because that will be easier. Find excellent, good, adequate, and poor examples and put them in front of you after you've graded them because that becomes like kind of a reference to you. Don't overmark. If it's not important for you to put a grade, then a pass or fail is enough. Then don't put too much effort into grading individual aspects. Just make sure that the student has passed the acceptance criteria. Respond to students' work as an interested reader would do that. So take care. If your student is receiving feedback, they would like to know that you have read through this assignment. So just be interested when you're writing the feedback. Indicate the major problems in papers that have not passed, because maybe a student will review this or may ask why they have failed, and you need to be able to come back to that paper and understand why that student has failed. Set limits on how long you'll spend on each paper, otherwise you might not finish this work before 2040, which is going to be a shame because your students need to graduate. For equitable grading, make sure that your assignments are anonymous. You don't need to know the names of the students. That's not going to be fair. Determine the general level of performance before you start setting the grades, because maybe if you do that, that would change the way you grade the assignments. So assignments in general are not criterion referenced. It's better to have them norm referenced most of the time. That's not a rule. So the rule here is always to have rubrics for everything. But just make sure that your students, the vast majority of your students, have understood and have attained at the bell curve level, and it's then that you can use the criterion. Avoid trying to mark entire exams or essays all at once. Say, today I'm going to mark the 1,000 exams. Makes no sense. That's stupid. It's not even fair for you or for your students. So don't even try to do that. When, for example, we have faculty and we have facility, maybe you would want more than one faculty to grade the same assignment. That would be more fair to students. If you can't do that, then maybe the failed students should be, or the failed assignments should be remarked by someone else. I would advise you do that just for the sake of our students. Avoid um, um, judging things that should not be judged, like for example what kind of pen he used, the handwriting, all that stuff. If it's not in your objectives, then you should not be marking it or grading it. Record all grades and numbers. All grades, letter grades, you transform them to numbers if this is a differentiating exam, of course, because when you're calculating the final marks, they're going to want a percentage or some kind of number to work with. Hopefully this was of use to you. I know it's a quick video. I know we all need it. I know even myself, I'm worried about these assignment things, but this is, in short, a video guide for you. Maybe you'll come back to it and use it at one point of time. If you think that there is anything else we can help with, please let me know. Let us know at ASU Mina Fry, because we're happy to help you anytime. And thank you all for being with us today. Hopefully you'll tune in again and listen to the rest of the